and visit with him. He said the rest of the family didn't have much to do with Joseph, Mary, and the other siblings, because, Jesus had about 9 brothers and sisters altogether, which is another thing the church doesn't really like people to know about. But these other siblings in the family didn't have anything to do with this older brother. But Jesus wasn't that way, and whenever he would come into Jerusalem, many times he would stop and visit with him, and they worked together. Well, this girl went back to the lifetime where she was a child of Joseph, a young girl. And so this meant she was a niece of Jesus. And she would listen, she said, stay up late at night listening to them talking. And many times there would be disciples there, and she would listen to these things. And she had made up her mind that she wanted to go with Jesus, with her uncle, whenever he went on his next trips, because she wanted to be a part of all this. She believed in all of this. But in those days, all a girl could hope for was to get married. And that's what they were planning. She was just 13, and they were already planning that she would be married and be a wife and a mother, because that's all a woman could look forward to. And she said she didn't want to hurt her family's feelings, but she said, I don't want to do that. I want to follow him. I want to do what he is doing. And one night, whenever he was there, she went to Jesus and she told him what she wanted to do. She wanted to follow him. And he looked at her and he said, you can't do this. You're a woman. It's not allowed. But she said when he looked in her eyes, he could see that she was sincere and she really did want to do this. So he talked to his brother and said, she really does want to do this. She doesn't want to disappoint you, but she does want to follow me and go with the rest of the group as they were going around the countryside doing their ministry. Well, the story is very touching, because he said in order for her to do this, she was going to have to cut her hair, disguise herself as a boy. That was the only way she would be safe traveling with this large group. And he didn't let anyone know she was related to him. And he changed her name so they wouldn't know. So they walked with Jesus is the story of these 2 women, and how this girl followed him with his group as they went to the different villages of the lepers at first. It's one of the first places they took him. And I always suspect Jesus did that on purpose, because if she couldn't take it, he would immediately send her back home. He would not let her go any further. She wasn't going to be able to take seeing these horribly disfigured people who had leprosy in those days. In those days, leprosy was a very feared disease, and they were the untouchables, and they put them away in villages all by themselves so that they would have no association with the rest of the people who were considered healthy. And I think he took her there first just to see her reaction, because it would have been a terrible shock for a young girl to see these things. Now, one thing I found was that when they were making these journeys, there were other people he took with him. One was John, the disciple, was, I guess you would say, the PR person. He would go ahead of Jesus and the rest of the group and set things up. He would arrange where they were going to stay. He would arrange where they were going to do the talks. And if there was any sign of danger, they had to divert their journey and go somewhere else. And many times in the story, in the book, they didn't meet in someone's house. They met in caves on the banks of the Lake Galilee and the Jordan River. There were caves, and they would meet in these caves that had been hollowed out that would hold many people. and they would put brush and things over the entrances so no one would know they were meeting inside. And this is where he did a lot of his teachings. Well, John was the one that would go ahead and set up all of these, and then he would send word back that it's all right, you can come to this place and that place, I have it all set up. And amazingly, Judas had an important role that is not understood. Judas was the scribe. He was the one who was writing down all of the things that were happening. They always say there wasn't any records kept. Jesus, as far as I know, didn't write any records, but it was Judas's job to record all the things that were happening. And he tried to record the miracles. He tried to record the parables that Jesus would speak, and to keep track of all these things. Now, after Judas committed suicide at the crucifixion, we don't know what happened to all these records. Is it possible that that is where some of the stories came down to us from? Is it possible that that is where the stories of the parables that Jesus spoke came from? Someone had to be recording these things. Otherwise, the books of the Bible were not written for hundreds of years after the death of Jesus. But what I found was one of the jobs of Judas was to be the recorder, the scribe. And Jesus never condemned him either when he betrayed Jesus and committed suicide. He just knew that it was going to be very hard on him when he crossed over, that he was going, anytime I found in my, I'm going to be going back later talking about next week, I think, finishing the story of life after death, that a suicide, you don't get out of it. If you, whatever you're committing suicide for, you have to come back and repeat it again. This is a school on earth where you learn lessons. You can have to take a grade over, but you cannot skip a grade. And if you fail that grade, you have to go back and take it again. And that's what's happened. You have to put in the same circumstances again so that you will work it out. And sometimes it can even be worse the next time. And I've had many cases of this in my work. But anyway, Jesus just felt very sorry for him because he knew what his life was going to be like and the karma that he was incurring. But anyway, this is what they would do. They would go to the village of the lepers. Now, he also took other people with him besides the disciples and the followers. Shows this was very practical, almost like the Peace Corps. He took people with him who knew carpentry. Because when they went into the village of the lepers, a lot of these people were so ill they couldn't keep up the buildings. So they would go in with a practical purpose. And they would be the carpenters who would make the repairs on the houses and try to make sure everything was okay. He also took some women with him. He liked to take positions when he could, but they were not always available. But he took women who had knowledge of potions and medicine, especially different powders, and how to make bandages and to salves and things that could be put on these people's, their open sores. So it shows that he did not rely on his own abilities. He was practical. He took other people with him who could help. And this was what the story was, that this young girl saw all of these things. And he was teaching all of his followers how to do the same things he was doing. He was teaching them healing because he had been taught all of these things by the Essenes. And when he taught them about healing, he would show them his hands. And he said she would draw an imaginary circle in the center of her hand to show me what he was talking about. She said, Jesus said Everyone has in the center of their palm a healing center. He didn't call it a chakra, but he said in the center of everyone's hand is a healing center. And they could heal by touching, and there would be energy come from their hands, and they could use it to heal. And as this girl watched when he would work on the lepers and work on the different people, she could see lights coming from his hands, and the light was powerful enough to heal. But you know, even Jesus couldn't heal everyone. I know the church likes to think that all he had to do was touch someone, and they were instantly healed. That may have been true, but he couldn't heal everyone. He had the ability to look at them, and he could see their karma. He could see why they had the disease, why they had the illness. And then he would know, was it their karma that they had to work out? Maybe if it was, he couldn't heal because he would be interfering in their karma. In a case like that, the most he could do would be take away the pain and the suffering. He was very good at that, but he couldn't take the disease away if it was something the person had to experience. So this gives a different viewpoint to the way we look at Jesus. He taught people, you can do the same things I can do and even more. And this is what is said in the Bible. He taught them, you can do these things and more. He was not someone special, one of a kind. He was special, but he was not one of a kind, the only one who could do these things. He intended to teach everyone that you all have the abilities to do these things. That's where they have put him on a pedestal that he didn't want to be on. He wanted to show people you could do these things yourself. And there are many books written now about the healing hands and about the power of the energy in the hands. There's many different modalities of healing, Reiki and different ones where they are able to utilize the energy from the body to help heal the person. This is the kind of thing he was talking about, and it is very real and it is very powerful. But Jesus learned how to do all of these things when he was on his travels. This is where the missing years came in. The Bible has the missing years, and they say nobody knows what happened during those missing years. Well, we found out what happened. He was traveling all over the world during those missing years. His uncle was Joseph of Arimathea, and Joseph of Arimathea was related to Mary. Now, in the Bible, Joseph of Arimathea is only mentioned one time where he's talked about as being the rich man who gave up his tomb for Jesus after the crucifixion. Joseph of Arimathea is one of the most remarkable characters in the whole story, one of the most powerful characters in the whole Bible scene, and that's different at time period. It's a shame that he has been overlooked because his role was extremely important in the whole story of Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea was one of the richest men in the world at that time. He dealt in tin, and he got his tin in England, the tin mines in England. And I've received tons of information from that area where people have sent me books about the legends, where everyone even today knows that about the tin mines, and they all know the stories and the legends of Joseph of Arimathea when he came and took the tin out of the mines for many, many years. Joseph of Arimathea had a huge fleet of ships that traveled all over the world, the known world at that time, taking the tin